and good morning to our viewers this morning. Can I just borrow a second also to greet my constituent, people of Cape Coast South, and thank them for the opportunity for retaining me to represent them.
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations
in Parliament, represent them in the general election. I'm grateful for that, and I want to tell them that very soon I'll be coming back for a thank you and a reconciliation or unity talks as we usually do. The IMF, I think, first of all, it is a welcoming news that we have finally been able to secure the government's request of a fund-supported program from the IMF, which is generally known as the Extended Credit Facility. We have gone through a process to get to where we are, and it has not been pleasant. But I think we should be relieved and also pleased that the government has signed up finally, to this program. But we should not be excited, because if you look at this document, which is what you were referring to, which is the report from the IMF, it's quite frightening.
It's frightening.
Yes. First of all, no two doubt we needed this program. But we actually desperately needed this program. But to be honest with you, the government actually doesn't deserve it.
I mean, the government doesn't deserve it?
Yes, government desperately needs the IMF, but doesn't deserve it. I will explain that to you. And I think you made a point earlier on about this is a reluctant government that basically stubbornly, reluctantly didn't want to go for this program. So the commitment was actually not there. If you look at what has been negotiated, look, in as much as we need a deal, what is being agreed is quite frightening. It's going to be very difficult. It's quite an ambitious program if you go through this. I've just had about less than 24 hours to go through it, so I haven't done it thoroughly, I must admit.
Yeah.
But the things that we have to do is quite frightening. It tells you clearly they are the right things to do, but the time within which
it has to be done.
As you just said, 16 or so structural reforms, 7 of them will have to happen this year. It looks as if we have waited for things to pile up to this point for us to begin to react to them. The things here are the right things to do, but the pace at which these things must be done will definitely have a serious consequence on the citizens of this country. The hardship that is on its way coming, already you've been mentioning about the tariffs and the taxes and all that are coming up, will really make it difficult. Look, this IMF program, which we normally go to get credibility and all that, is so frightening that and so ambitious that it's not even credible anymore. Because when something becomes too ambitious, too good to be true, you cannot actually rationally think about it as being credible. So the very thing that we went to the IMF to seek, and they have given us, the reason why we've gotten what we've gotten is that we negotiated in a hurry because we waited so long. You remember the we are a proud nation statement, we have everything we need, we won't go IMF today and all that. When us, if you don't want to listen to the opposition, experts like Doc and others were telling the government that, look, you need to go to IMF. And this is 2021.
But the likes of Dr. Tuye Champo talked about possible third quarter of 2021.
Absolutely.
Government should have gone to the
I
IMF.
do remember Dr. Tuye very well on that. As many as Bob King and Lord Minster and others.
We go in an ambulance and true.
Yeah.
We went in an ambulance.
And these guys will, that's why I say stubbornly reluctant. These guys will not budge. They say we are not going to IMF. Whatever happens, we won't go. We are a proud nation and all this stuff that they talked about. I don't know whether we have stopped being a proud nation. So what we have before us, in as much as we need it, it's not only the money, of course. The 3 billion we are getting, which is good. Its disbursement is all over the place. But we know that
Talked about some 3 areas.
we know that the IMF money is usually for balance of payment. That is the primary use.
Part of it
the
will be
money.
used for energy
But
debt payment.
Yes,
the
they have
external
so
debt
many things in
obligations.
here. In the end, it will do nothing. But what we seriously need is to be able to prop up our reserves, which, if you remember, they were telling us that we have 3 months of import cover and all that. We turn out that we don't even have a week's. You remember there was a time about some 9 billion being a gross reserve or a net reserve and all that. It just happened that it was just an empty barrel. And if you read this report, we'll give you the true picture of the state of our economy. If you go through this report thoroughly. And this is a report where actually this government is telling the truth to the IMF because they have no choice but basically raise their hand in the air and say, look, we have basically messed up and we need you guys to come to our aid. As a country, we must be pleased that the IMF is here because at the back of the IMF, as I said, it's not only the money from the IMF, but money from others, like the World Bank, Africa Development Bank, European Union, JICA, and whoever cares to be our development partners. What they will also bring on board. And then, of course, the very things that we need to do, the structure adjustment and all the structural reforms, that we have to do and all that. Very important. Now, the question becomes whether we have, as a government, I'm referring to the government, whether they have the commitment, the determination, and the will to carry this ambitious thing that they have signed up to. You know, it's like you are desperate for money. You go to your bank to borrow money, and you don't even read the terms because you need the money. Whatever the bank manager says, yes, that's fine. Oh, will you be doing this? No, that's fine. That's fine. Because at the end of the day, what you want to get to is to be able to get the money. And that is what they have negotiated for us. So yes, we are pleased that we need this, desperately do, but what is being negotiated is going to be problematic down the road.
Now, those are the initial comments. And let me bring in Dr. Tuye Champo as well on this, because prior to this point, together with his colleagues, they had made recommendations so that we would not, at least would have a less biting agreement apart from what we're seeing here. Because Dr. Tuye Champo, welcome again. I see, for instance, the details of this deal. Some of it had to do with a review of COCOBOT's own financing and also operations. There's a bit that has to do with the Bank of Ghana on lending of forex to the BDCs as well, which the IMF makes recommendations that government will have to eventually phase out. Already the OMCs are saying if this happens, it's going to impact on fuel prices going forward, because now the BDCs will have to come onto the open market to look for dollars to go and import finished products into the country. You look at this deal, how is it going to both impact on the Ghanaian people and benefit the Ghanaian people in both ways? Doc.
Yeah, good morning once again, and pleasure to be here. I want to side with a number of the points that have already been made. So just by way of preliminary comments, and I'll get to the substantive issues. But the first point is that we could have gone to the IMF much earlier if the government had actually listened to sound economic advice coming from various quarters, including from some of us who work in academia and in civil society. Be that as it may, we're here. And even if you look at the posture or the posturing of government in the lead up to this arrangement and even the timelines, I remember very well saying that the earliest time we could get a deal was May getting into June. And the government was very aggressive in saying, no, it's going to be March, thereabouts, you know. And now Honorable Ahmed also even talking about the fact that, you know, it is Russia, Ukraine, that in a sense, you know, is largely attributable to where we are now. I genuinely think we need some humility from the government to sort of acknowledge what brought us to where we are. Because in the document that is before you, the one produced by the IMF, the 130-page document, right? You quoted a portion that says that there have been large external shocks, but before that, there were pre-existing fiscal and debt vulnerabilities. We had been on a debt borrowing binge that whole time since about 2017, taking one Eurobond after the other and other sort of, commercial loan facilities. So really, we were in an acute crisis. And what has led us and even made the situation more worse is the fact that, in my view, we delayed, number one. And so basically, we had to go to the IMF in an emergency. Normally, when you go to the hospital in an emergency, they have to give you emergency medicine, which can be quite, painful. So that's a bit of the genesis. But I think that overall, what we have agreed with the fund has some positives, and there are some issues that would also, have to look at. Fundamentally, I think that the program is a good cure for Ghana's economic challenges. And in that regard, I side with Honorable Hagan on that front, that most of the proposals in the program, I spent all of yesterday and the day before going through it very carefully. But most of the proposals in the program are things that we should be doing anyway, with or without an IMF, support. So immediately, what the money does, that 600 million that we've gotten, it supports our reserves, it supports the exchange rate, and in the short term, we've even seen some sort of improvement or relative stability in the forest, market. But the money is just a small portion of what the IMF is actually bringing. The bigger issue is a question of, market confidence and policy credibility, and to the extent that we can unlock additional funding if we commit to implementing the reform areas that we've agreed to under the fund. And this is where really the conversation gets very interesting, because the program is very, very aggressive, and we've got to do a number of significant changes or interventions if we are to even get the next, tranche of payments. So there's a table in the IMF report that shows you between 2023 to 2026, right? The financing arrangement. So what the fund does is they cost the financing gap, and between now and 2026, it's about $15 billion. And there's detailed breakdown. So for 2023 alone, we've got a financing gap or deficit of $4.2 billion. Out of that 4.2, 1.7 billion is expected to come from the IMF, the World Bank, and sort of other development partners. But we've got 2.5 billion, so that's more than half of the gap, which we're expecting to be getting from restructuring our external debt, right? And this is contingent, so any further release of the IMF funding is all contingent, first and foremost, on the restructuring of the debt, and then some other structural reforms that we have to, in a way, undertake. So the point then is this: if we're unable to, get the 2.4 billion, 2.5 billion extra financing on top of the 1.7 billion making a total of 4.2 billion, you know what will happen? The process will delay, and then what will happen is that the recent gains that we've even made on the exchange rate front would end up being eroded, because the restructuring of the external debt is going to be done under the G20 common framework, right? And if you look at the process of how that takes place and who is involved, your creditors, etc., Zambia got a deal with the fund in August of 2022, right? And immediately they got the deal, you see their exchange rate starting to come down relative to the dollar. So there's a big improvement in the kwacha and some gains and relative stability. But as we speak to date, they've still not been able to conclude the debt restructuring. And so if you look at the exchange rate, kwacha to the dollar is actually, gone up. In other words, the local currency has lost significant ground, ending up eroding almost all the gains that they had made just in the period after the IMF program. So the imperative for me really is, if you look at the details and the gap or the size of the financing that we need and what we've got to do, and I've only just talked about just one big, small part of it, which is the external debt restructuring. We haven't even got into the other structural reforms, right, that we need to undertake. If you put that together with the structural reforms, the governance reforms, and the fact that we've got an election coming up next year, and typically in the lead up to elections, you see governments wanting to spend, etc. It becomes a bit difficult to see to what extent, if any, the government will be able to meet all of the sort of program benchmarks, given again that these are very, very ambitious timelines that we have committed ourselves to. So it's a good medication that we've got to take. The prescriptions, I wholeheartedly agree with, but the political economy dynamics and the issues around when you're going to actually conclude the external debt restructuring, the fiscal reform or the structural reforms that you've got to take, and then the financial and the monetary sector reforms that you've got to undertake, creates or leaves a lot of downside risks, right, or uncertainties around whether we can meet all of these, program benchmarks. Those would be my initial remarks.
No, let me stay a bit further on you. To the extent that the precedents we've seen in this country is that in the lead up to every election or going into the election year, there's excessive spending and a lot of profligacy. That for you is a red flag. It raises concern, right, about whether government can carry through these policies or the structural reforms. 16 of them, 9 of them are supposed to be done between now and then the end of the year. Okay, so if that is the case, and bearing in mind the fact that every release or every tranche that's supposed to come in is predicated on government's fulfillment of the target for that period, what has to be done to ensure that a government actually abides by these so that we don't throw this economy back into where we are seeking to get out of?
So a number of things have to be done, of course, on the advocacy front, like we're doing or talking and keeping and piling pressure on the government. But there are a number of other, key changes that are being proposed. So, for example, a key anchor for this IMF program is for the government to retain a primary balance on a commitment basis of 1.5% of GDP by 2025. What that basically means is that if you take your revenues, subtract your expenditure, and you don't include your debt servicing on top of that, we need to move from a position where currently it is negative to one that is positive. And one of the ways of proposals in this program is to actually go back and immediately change or amend the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And there are two proposals under the Fiscal Responsibility Act. One of them is to include this primary balance, but in addition to that, they're going to impose a debt ceiling, which then means that you're not going to be able to borrow as much as you would have to in the foreseeable future. And for me, I think it's one of the key things that must be done ASAP, that amendment to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, in a way that forces then or ties the government's hands going into next year against some of the profligate expenditure that we've been seeing in years past. Because if you look at the numbers, next year, according to the IMF document, on the expenditure side, we've got to reduce our primary expenditure from 19.3% of GDP down to 17.3%. And then increasingly, it gets down by 2026 to 17.2%. So between 2022 to 2026, our expenditure, the primary expenditure, needs to come down by 2.1 percentage points of GDP. At the same time, our the revenue and the grants needs to increase from 15.7% to 18.7% by 2026. So that has to go up by 3 percentage points between now and 2026, right? So you see that sort of dichotomy there where the expenditure has to come down, but we need to find a way to force the government to actually bring down the expenditure. And one of the immediate things that I think is priority is the amendment to the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And then on the revenue side, there are a number of proposals in the program to raise revenue and tariffs and you name it. But again, going into an election year where you have a lot of businesses already complaining about the difficult business environment, you struggle to see how, if not many of the revenue proposals would actually be implemented. So in my view, many of the targets here may probably not be fully met until after the election in early 2025. And whichever government is in power then will probably be the one that ends up implementing the sort of adjustments that are required.
So whichever government would obviously have to prepare for the implications thereof. But clearly the picture you paint is that macroeconomic stability will come at a very huge price to the Ghanaian people. That is not in doubt. Something that we would have to accept, quite unfortunately. I bring you in here, especially because there's a consistency that we went to the IMF at a very vulnerable state. And so the fund had to do something quickly to save the situation that we found ourselves in. That's what we're seeing now.
Yes, and that's sad because as Honorable Fuseni indicated, they were, what do you call it, banging all their hopes on Elevy, and Elevy that was stillborn. And Elevy that from day one. Oh yeah, it's true.
No, you're
Wait.
saying it. I kept on saying, look, the budget itself had 7 points. It wasn't just, E-levy was just one policy, which was part of the revenue mobilization drive.
That's fine, but if the E-levy...
In the seven, we intended to expand our local production capacity. Diversify export.
No, but the finance minister was very clear.
No, we are talking about
there are policies in the budget.
No, we are talking about 2022, not 2023.
I'm making reference to the statement by the finance minister. We've played this video a number of times. He was very clear in his statement that with the E-levy, we were sure we're not going to go to the IMF. And that's why he even said we're a proud nation and so on and so forth.
Yes.
It had nothing to do with the other six. Assuming
so
without admitting that there were other policies. If the E-levy did not achieve your objective, why did the other 6 policies not kick in so effectively to prevent us from going to the IMF at this vulnerable state? That's where the concern is. But I'll come to you on that.
Yes.
I want to be able to finish
the point I'm making is that Oforiatta doesn't understand economics, okay? And yet he said he can do it. So he kept saying, oh, this E-levy will work, E-levy will work. When the writing was on the wall that the E-levy was a stillborn idea, it couldn't help, it couldn't plug that loophole. They themselves came, okay, on the back of what? From taxation to what? Production. You come into government, you are not doing the production. What do you think will happen? Now, every day we come, you see this topic, it recurs every week. That's the basic. Honorable Fuseni, your people came on the back of what? From taxation to production. So you come in and you are not producing rice. You keep importing the same rice, even the figures are going up. You come in and the chicken and fish and all that are going up. You come in and fuel is going up and you think what will happen? So it was just a matter of time. Ask the president, when was the last time he could say that, yes, I'm leading a proper drive for local production of rice? He waited till the IMF, the economy collapsed, and now that we are about getting the program, you see every now and then the newspapers, Zoom Lion says, oh, importation of rice will be a thing of the past. You think one private investor can just produce rice for Ghana and then that, yeah, earlier this week, you see Zoom Lion, that importation of rice will be a thing of the past. In opposition, that's what the president said. And by the time COVID hit, over 36 months, what had you done? Had you brought in any foreigners to help produce any rice? Had you brought in even poultry? The poultry industry was collapsing. We import over what?
It was. It actually is.
Yes, collapsed. So this thing we are doing, every time I just said this, we are so dumb. And you don't know jack. You are just interested in slogans. And see how your slogans have caught up with it. Because every time you see the president, I'm like, so when will this man promote local rice production? Local rice, check his speeches. How many? How much? You just see that the man just doesn't understand. He's clueless in economics. And he wants to lead. Because that was what he was saying, the slogans. When we come, I'll change the structure of the economy in what? 18 months. Right. And this is something that we've known. Look, as far as I can remember, look, from secondary school economics, they will tell you, even a bit of it in JHS. You go to uni, level 100, level 200 economics we did. This thing has been there over 20 years, almost 30 years. You go level 100, level 200 economics, they'll teach you this thing. Then we come and sit here, you come into office, you don't have any proper drive to substitute the perfume rice Ghanaians have gotten used to. So as soon as you don't have any plan to substitute the perfume rice we are used to, then just know that it's just a matter of time and you'll be back to the IMF. Because rice, oil, fish, boom, billions. So once you keep importing that, it's just a matter of time, and you'll be back there. So with what you're saying, you see how the IMF, the report says it, the underperformance of the what? Controversial E-levy. I like that statement. Which page is that? Look at under point 7. It said non-oil revenues were significantly below their overly optimistic targets, with large underperformance of the new controversial E-levy. You see? Yes, the government was unable to announce across the board spending cuts due to large extra budgetary commitments by ministries, departments, and agencies, i.e., expenditures committed above appropriated budgetary allocation. Look at that. Such indiscipline. Where do you think it was going to lead you to? Such indiscipline, where do you think it was going to lead you to? I mean, you do like as if the economics is rocket science. Meanwhile, you just needed discipline. You binge borrow, and you are using for consumption. You just didn't have any proper plan to change the structure of the economy. Ask yourself, when local poultry production is collapsed, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen when local poultry production is collapsed? Ask them. Put on the poultry producers. They will tell you the cost of feed is so high, it's prohibitive. Because that's a major component. About 70% of the cost of producing the local chicken and the rest. So what do you think would happen? So for me, it just tells you that Oforiatta is not the man. He just doesn't have the wherewithal. He lacks the capacity to manage this economy. This guy just has to go. He's an investment banker. This is not the time for experimenting with investment bankers, okay? We need accomplished economists, people who know what it is. Because these things are basic. We all have learned this over 20, 30 years. what to do to change the economy. You come in, when you borrow, you are using it to pay salaries, you are using it for recurrent expenditure. You remember the expenditure on car tires, 2022. Okay, car tires and batteries at the office of the president. You're driving 40 V8s on one trip. And what do you, and then the president bathing in the sky. You think if you bath in the sky, what will happen? Isn't your economy going to collapse? Such indiscipline. This economics, how?
Let's
Chartering the private jet at over what? 20,000 pounds. But those are the things that contribute.
I think that
references
Martin, I think that we should move away from this.
No, but what did you bath in the sky? Is that not what Nitu said?
It is not what Nitu said.
How much is the cost per hour?
It is not what Nitu said.
The cost per hour of the private jet.
This pedestrian
politicization. What is pedestrian? 20,000 pounds. You take 20,000 pounds per hour.
That is not what Honorable Nitu said in Parliament.
Honorable City.
It is not what Nitu said. By the time it's down,
there was the reference you made to the Elevy, but it is also captured in the report. So I want us to come back to that, which Martin Pebu read. The over-ambitious targets, these are the words of the IMF, actually, on page 3. Point well made. So you cannot, the blame and reference to the Elevy failing, one of the major reasons why I had to go to the IMF itself is raising questions about that particular conclusion that you make. And
as to
specifically the fact that because the Elevy delayed in Parliament, and that contributed to the economic woes that got us to the IMF. When you reach page 3 of this document, it outlines specifically the IMF's own description of the Elevy as overly ambitious targets, the poor implementation of it, and the underperformance of the revenue targets as well, which were the basic concerns that the likes of Dr. Tue Champon raised when this whole Elevy conversation was going on. But then nobody listened to them, and then we got to this point.
You see, the vulnerabilities that we keep talking about predates the Elevy situation that we had to face with. I'm sure if Honorable Ricky Tegan and his caucus in Parliament had supported the policy, we wouldn't have been where we are. Or if the numbers in Parliament supported, like the previous Parliament, we wouldn't be. But don't forget, Alfred, that this government had to contend with certain financial commitments that was out of the ordinary. Typically, we are a government that have had to spend 25 billion in cleaning up our financial sector. This money had an opportunity cost. If we hadn't or we didn't have to spend that much money to sustain our financial sector, this money could have gone into other sectors of the economy. This predates the Elevy situation.
Is the next conversation.
We will get there. We'll get there. But these are the realities that we're faced with. I have mentioned IPP payments and the energy sector, its effects on the economy. And in that same report, in 2019, it's costing us 2% of our GDP. These are structural issues that the government had to deal with. These are commitments that, and they were contractual, that the government had to deal with. So it is not the case of us just borrowing and not and using it for recurrent expenditure. No, we have had to bear and deal with these issues with an economy that we all know. When it comes to revenue mobilization, we are lagging behind compared to our compatriots, being it in the sub-region, being it on the African continent. And we have to play catch-up. If the revenues are not coming in, and you still have to deal with extraordinary payments, significant extraordinary payments like this one, you are in a saddle, then you have to deal with them. Anybody outside of it could decide to say, yes, you are borrowing for profligate or
but
you're
borrowing to pay salaries is not a case in contention. I don't know why you are actually denying that government did not borrow to pay salaries or hasn't borrowed to pay salaries. Because the finance minister has made mention of that before. In fact, as we speak, about 70% of the total revenue is actually used to service our debts. Okay, and that's a concern that the finance minister raised. So if you're looking at that, that is just 30% left. You are paying over 650,000 people on the payroll. So that concern about the payroll being full, that statement he made a couple of years ago at UPSC was because government could not take up the wage bill, the increasing wage bill, which it had to borrow to pay salaries. So that is not a case in contention. In fact, if you look at the quantitative targets in this document, page 74 of this IMF document, it says that the wage bill should be at a certain level. The primary balance or surplus should not be less than 1% of GDP. That would mean a combination of more revenue expenditure policies coming in, which is going to impact on the Ghanaian people as well. That is where the concern is. The impact and the sacrifices the Ghanaian people will have to make more than what we're even making now, which is going to increase the cost of living.
Alfred, which one would you prefer? Us going on and retaining the structural defects that we have in our economy? At a point, we have to break that cycle. If you're saying that utility prices are going up, and it is going to put burden on Ghanaians, which one would you prefer? Us building up debts?
How long are we going to?
But we have
You've been in government for over 6 years.
We have a roadmap, right? In this document, it refers to how we are going to deal with our payables over a period of 7 years. And that is what a government in the saddle has to do. Face up with the challenges, face up with the structural defects, and make sure that we sell it. In fact, the effect is there for us to all bear. What would you prefer? As pricing electricity and other utilities at prices that people will enjoy today, and building up debts again so we come back to form ESLA to find a way to defray these debts? I think that at a point we have to take the very difficult decisions, and that is what this is about.
When we got out of COVID, the president announced a number of measures, which was complemented by the finance minister, about cutting down the importation of certain items. Martin Pebu made reference to that. Rice was included. What has been done to ensure that this is fulfilled? Poultry as well. 2 weeks ago, I was with the Poultry Farmers Association of Ghana. 94% of the broilers we consume in this country are imported. It's a fact. They are dealing with the collapse of that industry. So what are the specific measures that you have put in place after COVID, as you announced, to address these structural defects? One of the reasons why you were voted for in 2016. What has been done?
And I'm happy that even Martin Pebu, after all the issues that he addressed, he kept saying that he has been seeing newspaper reportage of the private sector taking the lead in rice cultivation within this country. This things don't happen. Honorable here. It's just recent, but I mean, there is an effort.
No, I'm asking
there is an effort that you're saying. How can you say it's too late? Perhaps when Honorable Rikesekan was at the Ministry of Agriculture.
And now, what has been done to address the structural defect? Because we've known that we've been running...
sorry.
You know that we've been running a Gagisberg economy for God knows how long.
Yeah.
The vice president, I sat through a number of the public lectures where he kept making reference to this Gagisberg economy. So what has been done to address the structural defects between 2016 and now?
Pre-COVID, we weren't in this situation. We had an economy that was growing. Albeit maybe the productive sectors had also started growing to pre-2017 levels. We saw industry, as a government, we had introduced policies that are being rolled out, that are running.
For example?
1D1F.
1D1F?
Yes.
What are the state of the factories of 1D1F?
Yes,
now?
1D1F.
No,
you see, it's very easy for you to pick up maybe one factory that was supported by 1D1F today that is not producing. But for where I have been and for the history that I have been, there is always something about policies. You don't expect that when I start running a policy today, the policy runs 100%. There's always a case where you get to an evaluation point. You take whatever is happening, you fit it in come back to the implementation stage and run it through. We will not start a policy today and get it 100% fixed. When we start 1D1, if you don't expect it out within 5 years, we are going to do 2,000 factories that are all producing. Fortunately, we can tell you that unless we have 126,000 factories, 126 factories,
No,
in Ghana today, that is running as a result of the 1D1 policy that
I'm just asking
that we run in
the
this country.
state of the 126, because you are making reference to them as you have established 126 factories.
That's right.
Which are running.
Yeah.
What is the state in this one of this 126 factories? That's number one. What products are they producing? Which makes them competitive to actually stay in business? Because we've done some work on these 1D1F companies. A number of them are suffering because, one, you didn't even do the market analysis to assure them of the market for the products that they are actually going to produce. They are still competing with cheaper imported products. So there was no commitment to create some level of protection for them to still stay in business. A number of them are closing down. That is if we support a factory, a business, and the 1D1, then down the line, it has challenges. It should be expected in business because these are cycles, right? These are cycles. Given the macroeconomic environment that we have today, if a company is unable or depends on some importation or some input and it's unable to, it's understandable. For us, what we need to do is to go back and fix it. But for some of these companies, I can tell you a point in Accra, behind Accra Sports Stadium, if you walk there today, there's a vehicle in there selling a confit juice, and that is a substitute to what we have been importing. That is how you build the economy. That is why you do import substitution. That is how you build these things. Over time, we will tend to have the full benefits of it. Qualitative impact of a confit juice production? Do you know that when you look at the
you were saying about this factory, and I have stated and given you an example, giving you a point in Accra that you can drive from here. Go there now.
I think I talked about the number of things. If we're going to be fair, I'm talking about also the impact that these companies have made. Because if you look at the list of items that the Ghana Fiscal Service publishes that contributes to the inflation, fruit juice is in fact, the first 5. Grapes, fruit juice, and the other things. They are there. So if you are looking at the impact and import substitution, what has been the impact of the confit juice production on the amount of fruit juice that we import into this country? Because it's actually been rising if you look at the Ghana Fiscal Service data.
Your question is justifiable. If you want me to give you figures, I mean, it's justifiable. That one, it's something that I probably can do, propose this program. But as I sit here, I'm telling you, even if I can't tell you that a confit juice is substituting maybe other brands or we have reduced the importation of other brands quantitatively, I probably don't have the figure now. Right? But I'm telling you that the impact for you to feel that I used to consume Ceres, which is an imported brand. Now I consume a confit in my own personal economy, in my own microeconomy. This is what the contribution is, and that is real. That is evident for every Ghanaian to see.
Well, but just so you know, if you go to a number of the malls in this country, you're not going to find a confit juice.
But I'm telling you where to find.
That's where concern. Let me bring in Rickett Hagan. That concern that Dr. Theo Champon raised, the targets that have to be achieved, which is going actually predicates the release of the monies and going into the election year, and the fact that government is expected, as we've seen in every election year, spend to get people to vote for them, and then also execute certain projects as well. If you look at the document, there's a tight fiscal corner that it puts government in. What has to be done to ensure that we do not default or fail in achieving these targets, which will then create bigger problems for us going forward?
Sorry, Alfred, before he comes in, just a couple of seconds. If
You want to take
if you
my
indulge.
time?
No, I'm not taking your time.
All right.
Just a little.
Explain the government
Is that
away.
okay?
No, you said second, so you go ahead.
Right. What I've heard here is that
I haven't said anything. You said what you have heard here.
I don't know if you can say it, but you have spoken.
No,
You have
so
said
make your point. Yeah.
You have said that government's commitment to this program is questionable, haven't you? You have said that it's an ambitious program.
Were you going to respond to him? Then let him finish talking. I thought you were going to make a
these are
different
points
point.
he had made earlier.
No, don't worry. I'll come back to you.
Okay,
Respectfully.
that's fine.
I thought it was something you were going to add to the earlier point you were making. Honorable Riketega, please.
Well, I will give him something to answer to. This government simply hasn't got the commitment or the discipline to carry any of the things that they have you through. It's all about just lip servicing. They have signed up to something that they think they can get away with it and pass on the burden to Ghanaians that this is the only way out. Now, they don't even own what is here with the IMF. First of all, and probably they are right that they are not responsible for this. They are not responsible for it because they were actually dragged to the IMF. They didn't go there by themselves. So they can claim that they are not responsible for it. The things that are here, and as Dr. Theo was saying, these are the right things to do. We all know that. The right things to do that we haven't done over the years. In the last 7 years or 6 years that this government has been in power, they have absolutely not done anything significant that changes any of the things that they were talking about. The Georgesburg economy, the structural reforms and all that. It's just been lip service after lip service. Look, one particular thing that has failed totally is this planting for food and jobs. If you want specifics, why we are where we are, you borrowed loads of money to put into this Ministry of Agric for planting for food and jobs. But none of it actually happened. The more they planted, the less we harvested. Because and the numbers in GDP will tell you, the numbers in food inflation will tell you, the highest component of inflation is food inflation. So if they are planting for food and jobs, where is the food going?
So planting for food and jobs didn't contribute to it?
If you go to GDP, agriculture sector, especially the part that deals with, planting for food and jobs, was actually contributing less and less to GDP over the years.
The cereals?
Yeah, so that clearly tells you that is a failed policy, that they have borrowed money. They were putting 600 million in addition to Ministry of Agric's budget every year on planting for food and jobs. So all that money is obviously being wasted, and these monies were actually borrowed. And that is why it's one of the reasons we are where we are. The frivolous, the bad thing in the air, all these things contribute. And they don't want to accept it. Look, this government needs to change its, when we refer to, taking a bath in the air, we are referring to the frivolous and lavish lifestyle.
Private jets
of this government. They need to change their posture. If they don't, it's not only they don't have the commitment or the discipline, but their posture itself is not going to allow them to accomplish any of this. Look, the 600 million that has come in, it's just an intent from, a goodwill intent from the IMF that, look, you guys are in trouble. We are giving you this. But the subsequent payment will be based on the performance measures that we have, that you have to be able to meet. And I can tell you, forget about election year, the commitment and the discipline to do all these long things that they have here, it's going to be problematic.
You doubt the commitment of government to do
this?
They
don't have the commitment. They didn't want to go to this IMF in the first place. So the commitment to go there is not there. They have arrived there. The commitment to carry the things through, they just wanted the money and the things that comes with it by other development partners who will also basically through a domino effect or, a ripple effect or whatever it is, bring some more money. They are looking at who is bringing what. If you listen to the governor of the Bank of Ghana, the Minister of Finance, all the things they were talking about is who is bringing money next for them to consume. They don't have all the things they're talking about, the strategies, whatever. None of it, they are committed to any of them. You don't see the commitment. Look, for the last 6 years or so, what has been the commitment of this government to get the things that they said they were going to do? You know, they will always go back to, the 1D, 1F. It's another failed policy. Again, even though they said...
Honorable made reference to 126 factories.
126 factories of what size? Producing what? How many people have they employed?
Producing shoes.
You are
talking
talking
not a
about...
good start to change the structure of
You
the
are talking
economy?
about... You have nothing to do with the shoe factory that is producing shoes in the... Well, is that the one I thought you were talking about Kumasi?
No.
The problem with those... You see,
we're not referring to the
and Martin said something which for a very long time I have believed in. And I look at the pedigree, maybe on paper, of some of these people, and you think they know what they are about. But I have come to the conclusion that neither the finance minister or the managers of the economy, I'm not saying they don't understand economics, but they don't understand the economy, this economy that they are managing. For that reason, they don't know what the solutions are. And even if they see them, they will not be able to tell.
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand the problems you are facing, you wouldn't be able to know what your solutions are. They went to IMF with an empty hand. They went there to beg. Look, this woman has done us a great favor.
You mean the IMF boss?
Boss, look, this program they've given us is more or less on a humanitarian grounds. Yeah. Though it's going to have a severe consequences. They gave it to us. We did not qualify for the program.
If you say we do not qualify, what do you mean?
The basic qualification you need to be on an IMF program is to have a sustainable debt. We don't have a sustainable debt. The second one is to be able to restructure our debt, the debt exchange. We have stopped paying our external debt, both the bilateral one and the commercial ones. We have botched up domestic debt. We have people we have not paid. We said there's not going to be any haircut. Now there's a haircut on principal, haircut on returns.
Yes.
And now they have paid some coupons, but they haven't paid the maturity. So nothing qualifies us to be on this program. That is what I said earlier on, that we needed this program desperately, but we don't deserve it. Because we have not done anything to demonstrate. We have no signal that we want to do the things. Look, condition precedent has now become condition subsequent. The things we should have done to be on the program are now going to be done while we are in the program. And it is going to be extremely difficult because we didn't allow ourselves time to be able to do all these debt restructuring. Because by now, there should have been a headway. I keep saying that the elephant in the room is not China. The elephant in the room is your external commercial debt, which is going to be problematic going forward. When you look at all the things that are coming in, you still cannot get any clear path on how we are going to pay our external debt. Look, this money we have gotten, 600 million, is supposed to do balance of payment, is supposed to pay external debt, which is now in arrears, in dollars. With the exchange rate that we have at the moment, what we have, the reprieve or the temporary reprieve that we have at the moment, is only for a short while. IMF will not see you through the long haul. The rest will have to be done by you. But if you don't have the commitment, the discipline, you're just going to take this short-term monies. World Bank will bring it, JICA will bring it, European Union will bring it, and all when they come, they go to the same drain that they've been going in. And nothing will happen. The serious thing is that, look, one of the reasons, I was just thinking, because I had always thought that getting a program would be difficult. So when I realized that we were going to get a program, I started thinking that why is the IMF going to give us a problem? program. Then I realized our situation on the continent. Look, this is one of the most peaceful, safest countries in the sub-region. Look at what has happened all around us. The world needs us, needs Ghana to be a shining example in terms of peace. If this IMF, if these things don't go through, there is going to be chaos in this country. And to prevent that from happening, they thought, look, politically, this was given to us politically. Let's give them this program and let's hope that we'll be able to help them along the way. But in terms of strict qualification of going on an IMF program, we have not met it. Even when we went to the staff level agreement, we had to come back and do certain things, and then they just send us through. Look at the shortest possible time that we have taken in actually getting a program compared to Zambia and others.
It says the government must be commended for that. This is the information minister
you
saying
can't
that.
commend somebody who is not even committed in what they have. You want them to commend them for. This program was given to us because of the dangers, the political risk that we have in this country. That if something doesn't come in, hell will break loose. And if hell breaks loose in Ghana, it will not be good for the sub-region. None of the countries around us are really, really, really safe countries. And Ghana is seen as one country that at least sits in the middle of conflict resolutions and all that. If Ghana becomes a conflict zone, we have lost it. And if it's 3 billion that needs to come in for us to be that stable, then that is why this is a humanitarian IMF program. They need to rename it.
Humanitarian IMF
Program that we have been given.
But the U.S. ambassador said
to make sure that this country stays sane. The humanitarian side of it is the things that we need to do within the time frame. The things are the right things, and I agree with Dr. as he agreed with mine that they are the right things to do. But because we did not negotiate them to get the timing and the pacing right, it has been front-loaded for us to do these things, which is going to be near impossible to do.
That
now,
is giving the time frame.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not possible,
No,
but the time frame.
The time frame
is.
Look at the things you're talking about.
You have admitted that these are the things that we necessarily have to do.
Yes,
you have admitted to it.
But you have that 6 or 7 years.
Why are you questioning the
You haven't done
commitment?
any of it. Who tells you that you do it in 1.5 years? That
But
is left,
we have gone to
especially with an
negotiate this.
election.
You said that it was not even impossible. Even when we were
you
talking
have
about
not negotiated
timelines.
anything. This thing has been given.
All right,
Even when
gentlemen.
we're talking about
Can I
timelines, you
finish?
doubted it. Now that we
I will
have
finish.
gotten an agreement, now you are doubting our
Can I-
commitment to the agreement.
Well,
Okay.
I started saying this is
you have been
2016.
committed to so many things in this
quickly
place.
round up.
You have been committed to so many things in this
please.
country that you have not honored.
Exactly.
Like
You
what?
have not
Like
honored
what?
like the pension. This debt restructure you've done. You said there will be no haircut. There's been a haircut.
We are still
You
dealing
said
with
you're
it.
going to pay. You
We are
haven't
still
paid.
dealing with it.
You
You
change the
said-
structure of the
We are
economy.
still
in 18
dealing with it.
months.
You haven't done
Yes,
anything.
that is why we have done planting for
You know,
you sit
so
here, you say planting for
ba-
foreign jobs. It's
basically-
not achieved anything.
What have you achieved in
The
planting
yields,
for-
look at yields of maize.
Oh, please.
Look at Ghana's position on the global
no, hold on,
index.
hold on.
Look at it in
These are
simple
all
terms.
reality.
wait.
These
If
are
you want to
stats for you
see,
to
if you want to see planting for food and jobs,
Yes.
look at
Look at the
inflation and
yields.
GDP. Just look at inflation and GDP. Look at the contribution of planting for food crops in your GDP, and look at the contribution in food. One of the biggest items, if
Let's
not the
take- let's-
biggest,
from-
in
you see-
inflation.
No,
is
honorable
food
is
inflation. It's food inflation. So you cannot be. Are you the only country that the more you plant, the less you harvest, and therefore it doesn't feed into your macroeconomic indicators? Look, you have to change your posture. What you are doing, you are. Look, if we hadn't gotten this program, you would have run all of us down. Then my excitement, and I shouldn't be excited, please, about this program is that we have it, and it will give us some short-term relief, hoping that you guys will do the things that you need to do. But on a hindsight, looking at your track record, what you have not been able to do with all the 6 glorious years that you have, I have no belief that you'll be able to do this. And then the election year becomes critical. But let's
Coming from you, it's very rich, you know.
let's even hope. Well,
Coming
you've been
from
in
you,
power
it is
for the
rich.
you've been in power for the
And
last.
the report
What
gentlemen,
you did and
please,
what you left for us.
Let's maintain some.
it is very rich.
I beg
You
you,
ask
please.
for people to
Let's-
vote for you that you have solutions to Ghana's problem. That the money is here, we are sitting on it. Now you are looking for it in IMF. I thought we went to IMF because we didn't know we were sitting on money, and you did, and you too you came, and then the money is not there. You are going to the same IMF. The IMF that has a dire consequence is where you are.
So we keep
The
saying.
IMF, that when you go, you are not a proud nation. It's where you are.
Here's what I'll do. If you keep
you-
doing
I-
this, I'll take the number of some minutes out of your time. It's a rule on this show. If you keep interrupting without my permission.
No, he's addressing me.
no,
That's why I'm
I'm addressing all of us, and I'm addressing
Honorable
Ghana.
gets to know that me and him, we are not like that.
No, that's okay, but it's not serving the viewers well.
No, Alfred, I
You
don't
know,
think, I don't think it should be.
Let me
Round
finish
it up
on
for
yeah.
me in
Let
a
me
minute.
finish on this one. The IMF program again, I will say that it's a relief. We needed it, and again say that we actually did not qualify for an IMF program. We went in late. We have not been able to meet all the things. The first thing, IMF, that is why they did debt sustainability analysis, because that is the first thing that they did. Nobody can tell me that Ghana, all of a sudden, has become a debt sustainable country. When you have stopped paying even, well, your ratings is now a restrictive default. I mean, look at what has happened since the time that Dr. Theo and others, Theo Achampon and others said we should be going to IMF and all that. From that time to now, we have just disgraced ourselves along the way. We've become a laughing stock wherever you go on the continent.
Is that what it is?
Absolutely. Haven't you seen Nigerians making a mockery with our debt and all that? Look,
And the
haven't you
former
seen some
head
of
of
the
the African
TikToks?
Development Bank too.
People are talking about how, how not to mismanage your economy.
Yes.
And Ghana is the example. How we have borrowed so much. Because of Ghana, a lot of people now have stopped giving you sovereign guarantees. And
Okay.
there are some countries you cannot. We've become a laughing stock.
Right,
And
thank you.
if we had done this earlier, the situation would have been better. But we wasted so much time in going to the IMF that along the way, we did so many things that has been disgraceful, shameful, and we have managers of the economy who don't seem to know. I have come to the conclusion
Right.
that
The
the managers of our economy, whether they are economists or not, don't understand this Ghana's economy.
Dr.
And now that
Champong.
we are finished with the IMF, hopefully, I hope the president will see off the finance minister as he promised.
Dr. Theo Champong, so before we got to this approval, you had made proposals for government to consider reviewing some of the social policy interventions, for instance, the free senior high school. The finance minister and indeed the IMF repeated the point that anchored on this policy is the protection of the vulnerable, and then also some of the policies that we're talking about. The budget allocation to free senior high school has been increased by some over 28%. So if we are preserving the free senior high school financing in its current form, regardless of the concerns you raised, what has to give for us to sustain this even in this IMF program?
Yeah, thank you. The problem we have in the education sector, right, is about twofold, and I've been involved in doing detailed work on education financing. We're spending a lot more money at the senior high school level, but the problem really that we've got in terms of the education outcomes is actually at the primary school level, right? So you've got a mismatch where every 10 people that start primary, you only have, if my numbers are right, just about half of them entering senior high, and then subsequently you do have about one or so entering the university. In terms of education spending itself, the levels we've been spending on education, the UNESCO benchmark is 4 to 6% of your GDP every year. We used to be doing around the 6% mark. but in the recent numbers, it's actually just about 4% of GDP. So in real terms, education spending is actually come down over the last few years. And I think there's scope to actually increase spending to education, but rather the focus ought to be on primary education. And then with secondary school under the free SHS, it's about expenditure rationalization. It's also about allowing the parents that can contribute to help support, in the running of their schools. It's a similar thing with health, where again, in health, we're spending 3.5% of our GDP on health expenditures. But if you look at the data, we have major disparities when it comes to access. So health NHIL only covers about half or so of the population. The other thing is with social protection. And here, the good thing that I think is in this IMF program is the idea of revising the amounts and sort of indexing or linking it to inflation, so that our people that find themselves in the extremely poor or vulnerable population would at least get an increment that is commensurate with inflation, or maintain the spending levels in real terms. So there are some positives on that side, but the fundamental problem which Honorable Ricky Tigan was talking about, and I think the other honorable also highlighted a few. But look, we've got a major issue. This IMF program is, only a temporary sort of fix. The current money that we've got, the 600 million, right? It's like going to the hospital and you being given morphine or some other medication to stabilize you. Then they've got to move you from ICU into some other ward and subsequently giving you the full course of the medication that you need to take to get well. And this is where, again, for me, when I look at the numbers, I get a little bit worried, because, you see, if you have a financing gap of 4.2 billion in 2023, according to the IMF document, and another 3.3 billion in 2024, together you're talking of what? Almost $7.4 billion financing gap. And only about 40% of that is coming from your official creditors. So the money that the IMF is giving you, the money that the World Bank would bring in, and some other sort of considerations, you still have a major chunk, and this is the issue, over 60% of the money that you need to close that gap is predicated on restructuring your external debt. So the savings that we are going to get on either interest or on principal, if those monies don't come in because the restructuring is delayed, or because your bilateral creditors and even the commercial creditors, the Eurobond guys, who are like the biggest component of all of this. So we've got about 20 billion of external debt that we're looking to sort of restructure, right? Out of that, we're looking to get about 10 billion of that in as relief. So let me break it down again so that our people can appreciate these numbers. Every year, we need to get $2.6 billion of debt relief if the numbers and the targets that the IMF has, or we have agreed in this program, are to be met. Are you getting the point? But if that is extended, because we have seen in the case of Zambia, they got an IMF program, but they have still not gotten to agree terms with the creditors and all of that, then what basically that means is that you're not going to be able to close that $4.2 billion gap in 2023 this year, and neither are you going to be able to close the gap in 2024. So you might then even have then a further possible run on your currency, your exchange rate, and inflation and all of that. So it fundamentally comes down to how fast we can, if any, get those agreements with the creditors. And then number two, also swallowing the bitter pill in terms of the reform commitments, the structural reform things that we've been discussing, about here. And that is where, again, when you look at what we say we will do this year and next year, against the prospect of an election next year, I begin to get a little bit worried.
Dr. Thea Champong, thank you very much for your thoughts on this. And so, even though trust is a very, very important component in managing the economy, you still raise concerns about the issue of the trust for government to commit to implementing this. But we don't have a choice, because now fulfilling these conditions has become the requirement to the release of every tranche of the money from the IMF. So there's no alternative, isn't it, Dr. Thea Champong?
Yes, but if you don't fulfill the conditions, those sort of benchmarks, right, within the timelines that are required, these things would be, they're going to be press releases. There'll be documents that will come out. And so basically the market players or market sentiments begins to erode. And you then may even have a further run on your currency and other sort of macroeconomic variables. So I do agree with you in the sense that, yes, the government has to do something in order to safeguard those gains that have been made. But I'm also not oblivious of the fact that, in all of this economic discussion here, there's also a political variable to all of this. And given what we have seen by history and things like that, there are significant risks that we need to consider.
I appreciate you on this. Dr. Thea Champong, thank you so much. And indeed, at that point, very important about the political aspect of this conversation. Dr. Thea Champong is an economist and then also a political risk analyst joining us there. I got this information from Dr. Charles Nyaba with the Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana, saying most farmers have shifted from maize and rice to crops that do not require too much fertilizer because of the increasing cost of fertilizer on the open market.